This is the Balanced Advisor Podcast with Dr. Travis Perry, helping financial advisors like you achieve balance in their lives.
All right, welcome, loyal listeners, to another episode of the Balanced Advisor Podcast. I'm your guest, Dr. Travis Perry. With me today, I have a special guest, Mr. Brent Kelly. Brent is the president of Sitkins Group, Inc. He is a motivating influencer, coach, and speaker who has a passion for helping insurance agencies maximize their performance. He spent 15 years in the insurance industry as a successful commercial lines producer and was named one of the top 12 young agents in the country in 2012. He's also a certified leadership coach of the Maxwell team and shared the stage with John Maxwell in 2017. We're going to have to talk about that one. As the host of the popular Agent Leader podcast and a Rough Notes contributor, Brent's focus is to help insurance professionals gain influence, grow their book of business, and become their best version possible. Hence the book behind you, which we'll talk more about today. But most importantly, Brent resides in Central Illinois with his wife, Tracy, and 5 children. Brent, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much, Dr. Perry, for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you.
Absolutely. So my listeners know how this format works. We always like to hear a little bit about you and about just how did you get into this financial industry?
I think the safe answer is that, like every person who wants to get into insurance or financial services, I dreamed about it as a young boy. No, not so much. But no, I got into it like many by accident. I think that's how it happens to a lot of people. My brother was in the insurance industry, an independent insurance agent. He was a manager of a pretty good sized agency in Wisconsin. Asked me out of college if I had any interest in the business, which I immediately said, no, not a chance. Only to find myself several months later saying, "Hey, is there still an opportunity to have a conversation? I'm looking for a job." So that was my way into the business itself. As you read in my intro, my time was all spent in independent insurance agency office, and I was a producer. I was out in the sales force and having conversations. And I started off in my early 20s working with business owners. So you can imagine a 22, 23, 24-year-old young guy who could barely spell the word insurance, trying to tell business owners, or at least influence business owners to be with them. But a lot of great lessons. And I'm sure as you've experienced, there's highs, there's lows, but there's a lot of growth along the way. And so after about 15 years in the business of being in the business, I had a passion for speaking and training and coaching. And so transitioned into that world and started my own company, learned a lot of things that I didn't know that I needed to learn in that aspect. And then joined the Sitkins Group in 2017 with Roger Sitkins, and just working with independent insurance agencies, having a great time doing it.
Love it. That's great. Tell us a little bit about your family. We talked on your podcast how it's rare that you find someone else with as large a family as you do. We've got 7 kids. You have 5. Tell us about that a little bit. Just intro to the Kelly family.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, before I'm a business person, I'm a husband and I'm a father, just like you. Right. And when we talked about my podcast about that, I said, typically when I speak or go to events or coach and people say 5 kids, and people come to me and go, "Well, I only have 2 or I only have 3." And I go, "Well, first of all, it's not a competition." And secondly, and when we talk, I said, there's actually someone who's got more than me. No, I've got 5 great kids, amazing wife, my wife, Tracy. She's like many spouses and wives and families. She's the rock. So many things at home with the kids, and there's so much involved with that. I've got 4 daughters and 1 son. So they range from the age of 18. I got a senior in high school, so she's getting ready to graduate and do the college thing. And I've got a toddler who's 4. I guess still a toddler at this point, at home as well. So it's quite the dynamic, like
No, and all too well. And you're right. It's not a competition. Everybody has different family size, but it's always fun when people are like, "Whoa, you have 7 children? Yeah. Did you start when you were 12?" I get that all the time. But it's a fun thing, but it also adds to this dynamic, which we're talking about today, which is it's the whole balance dynamic.
Yeah.
So, you're an awesome producer. You work at the Sitkins Group. You're helping motivate and help other insurance agents, which we'll get to in just a second. So what is your definition of balance? Everybody has a different one. And literally, I've heard over 300 definitions to this question in various forms that we've interviewed for the book and interviewed for the podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, man, how do you define balance?
Well, it's such a, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, because I wish I could say, well, here's the exact answer of what balance is. Cause I think, to me, it's a journey of what that means. Obviously, you've written the book on it, right? And kind of what that means in your world and what you've learned from all your experiences and just so many fantastic insights in that. If I had to summarize, and this is probably oversimplistic and there's a lot to it, balance to me, if the word that comes to my mind when I hear balance around it is freedom. And how do I gain freedom? Because I think what happens so often is, like a lot of people that have desires to grow and develop and get better and grow and run businesses and all these things, is that the minute you start running one direction, you got stuff pulling on you the other way, right? And that's where you start to lose that balance, so to speak. So to me, I mean, the way I look at it is with freedom is, freedom for me is, am I living my purpose? Like, am I doing things that matter? And, obviously there's all kinds of aspects of any career, and anybody that says, every day is a perfect day, I'm sorry, that's just, you're not telling me the truth. But there's got to be a purpose, right? There's a mission of why I do what I do, and it matters. And then I think there's the financial part of that. I mean, one thing that I've learned is money isn't everything, right? But it does provide opportunities. So there's a balance in that, just being able to have some of the financial freedom. And then, of course, freedom in relationships. And this is true, I think, Travis, in work, it's true in business and life. And for me, it's like, what are the most important relationships? Because let's face it, it's easy to get out of whack quickly. Like, you start going down this track and you're like, wait a second. And we could talk more about this, but I had a mentor of mine years ago who said, well, it looks like you're doing a really good job of organizing your calendar. He goes, how important is your wife? And I was like, well, she's probably right there at the top. And he goes, wouldn't she be first on the calendar, not when it's convenient? So there's that obviously freedom. Am I in the right, doing the right things in the relationships? And then the last one, which I don't know if it's last, but it's just in my mind as I'm explaining this, is time, freedom of time, which is usually where people start with balance, right? I mean, it's like, how do I manage all this? And so to me, with balance, it comes back again to priority. What am I doing? When am I doing it? Am I doing the things that really matter with my time? Because one of the things that we talk about at Sitkins, and just my own belief, is, time is your only diminishing asset. You can get back other stuff. Like, I live in the insurance world. You can get back stuff, technically, right? Obviously, people do pass away, but outside of that, you can get back relationships if you do the right things and reaffirm relationships. You can earn more money if you lose money. But guess what? I can't get back the time. And, I think as you get older, you don't appreciate it in some cases till you start living a little bit longer. And I still feel like hopefully I'm sort of young, but I've got a lot more gray hair than I used to. And you just come to appreciate at the end of the day, what was it? Was I focused on the things that truly matter? And if not, am I going to start doing things that do matter? So that is a really long answer to your question. But hey, that's why I'm talking to you. You're the one that's wrote the book on it, right?
No, this is so good. I mean, priorities, time is diminishing asset. Everything that you talked about there is so spot on. I'm actually teaching a course for some youth in our neighborhood, in our area here. And I'm taking these exact same principles that we wrote about in Achieving Balance, and I'm giving them those principles. They're true principles. Now, what I teach is for financial advisors, insurance agents, because it's very unique, right? This industry is very unique, which we'll talk about in a second. But you're absolutely right. It's all about priorities. We talk priorities first before we even get to time. And that's because if you don't have the mindset, you don't understand what you're doing, you could be incredibly productive and be way off out of priority, right? Yeah. So, and that's honestly those are watching on the YouTube channel, or you've gotten the book. I've got the redone book cover with the priorities like in balance, saying, hey, what are your highest priorities? And I've actually found that the majority of people who do these interviews basically say something very similar. Like, when my priorities are, at the top, like those top priorities are getting the time it needs, I feel balanced. So it totally matches up, Brent. I really appreciate that. So, as you are, doing your thing and you're helping your family, like you're being this balanced individual. I know that, coming from this producer role myself as an insurance agent, I started with State Farm. We did the Northwestern Mutual thing. Like, I understand what it's like to be, and then go independent. So I get your audience, but now that you're as an advisor to these insurance agents, these insurance advisors, what do you think your biggest struggle, your biggest issues, your biggest setbacks are when you try to achieve your definition of balance?
There's a lot to that question, with the things that come through my mind. And so I'm just going to kind of rattle off some things that jump to the top. Number one is that when you're, and again, I've been doing different types of coaching and training and speaking. You get a lot more awareness of the things that you teach on if you're really doing them yourself, right? It becomes very real. And obviously, in our world, we teach independent insurance agents. A lot of it's around leadership and sales and growth, but it really boils down to the core of what you do and you talk about is priorities and philosophies and right. I mean, there's those things that are built in there, accountability. So when we're talking about these things, one of the first things, the challenge to me as an advisor to advisors is, am I practicing what I preach? I mean, there's, and by the way, if you're speaking or teaching of any kind, I mean, you're never going to be perfect with it, but boy, you go, wait a second. I just talked about, being in my strength zone. Am I spending this week in my strength zone? So those kind of things, first of all, is one of the biggest challenges of just practicing what you preach. So that to me is a big one. The other one, I don't know this. It's interesting because in the insurance world, like everyone needs your stuff, right? I mean, in fact, in the property and casualty world, a lot of my people that I work with are in, they're required to buy this stuff, right? I mean, this is true for auto insurance too in most states, right? So it's not like it's hey, if you get around to it, it's like, no, they're gonna have to get it from somebody. So in my space, an advisor, it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's a luxury item because I don't think it's that. I don't think in those terms, but it's not about, okay, you're going to get it from who. It's how do I get people to understand the importance of what our services can do for them? And really feel it and understand it. And I think, part of this from when I deal with leaders, because typically the decision makers, whether it's a larger agency or a smaller agency or somewhere in between, you have to admit that you don't have it all figured out. You have to admit that you need help. So what you're doing is you're trying to sell, right, and transfer ideas in a package to someone who says, to buy from you, I have to admit that I don't have it all figured out and my team needs your help and I need your help. That's a really big challenge when you're advising advisors, right? At that initial part. And I see you nodding your head. I'm sure it's just like, I have to admit that I don't have it figured out. So there's
let's be honest. Let's be honest. There is a certain ego that shows up into this industry. That might be the common theme. Type A driver. I want to do it. Independent, like just the name, like independent insurance agents, right? Aren't we independent? We want to do it ourselves.
Yes.
Or is it just the offering, right? So we can help other people the way we want it. So I think you're hitting on something here that's huge. And let me direct that because I know I was cutting you off here, but as you're thinking, okay, it's really difficult to help this audience. You're driven to it. You want to help them because you've been there, you've done that, and you've really, succeeded tremendously this way. There's that pressure. That's kind of what you're saying, right? Is this pressure that's coming from just doing what you're doing?
Yeah, there absolutely is that pressure, and it's. I think one of the things, and I don't know this is the challenge. I think it's one of the solutions potentially, or I think it helps connect. Because to me, one of the biggest things, and I think this is true in any aspects of communication, and whether you call it sales, influence, is that, and goes back to my, my mom said this when I was a little kid, she said, those convinced against their will are of the same opinion still. All right? It's been around forever. And so to me, there's two choices when you're discussing things with people, is you either try to convince them to do something or you connect with them. And, a big part of, I think, of connection is vulnerability. So I think the ego thing comes on both sides, because you'll have in many cases, and this is true, I'm sure with advisors that you talk to as well, and advisors that I work with and insurance people, is sometimes you got to be able to just be open, a little bit vulnerable. And I had a speaking coach and person years ago, and it was a struggle. It's like, listen, when you tell people what they should do, they may listen to you, right? But when you show your vulnerabilities and your weaknesses and some of the things that you've learned through pain, right? People will lean into you. There's a difference. And so I think a lot of that is just being open. It just goes back to whether I am working with someone or they're working with someone of their clients. It's, are you willing? It doesn't mean that, I don't know anything and the life is terrible. It's just, hey, listen, I've been where you've been. It's tough. And all we want to do is help you. So I don't know, I'm probably getting a little off track with your question, but I just think it's, you say, what's a struggle with it? It's just, for me, am I willing to be vulnerable? Yeah.
Yeah, I see this. And actually, I've noticed, especially with social media, people are actually socially rewarded on social media when they're socially vulnerable, right? Sure. I noticed this trend for the last few years, like, hey, I've really struggled with depression or mental health or whatever it is, that a lot of other people are struggling with too. But they're like, yay, thanks for talking about it. Nobody else is talking about, it's that vulnerability.
Yep.
There's kind of a pendulum. I think it's too much now. It's like, you're telling me every little detail about your life.
Right.
This is not Facebook, right?
Right.
On LinkedIn, at least. Facebook police or the LinkedIn police will come out. But I think what you're trying to say is that there's a balanced challenge, because you're trying to help people, lead them, grow their businesses, increase their sales, and you love them so much. You want to help them. You want to serve them. So there's part of you that's like, I really want to help this specific industry. It does take a lot of your time, right? It does take a lot of your energy. I've found, at least in my book, Achieving Balance, that there's something that I term the workaholic trap. We talked about this a little bit on your podcast. And the workaholic trap is, you're not a bad person for wanting to help people. In the financial industry, we're helpers, right? We're helpers. We're also drivers. So that mix of helping and driving really can create a workaholism mentality.
Yes.
What do you do then to disconnect, to separate, to make sure that you keep your balance?
Yeah, I want to answer that. It's another great question. But I was just thinking that, it's that balance of credibility and vulnerability, and you can go too far on both ends if you're not careful. For me, what's really helped me on things is, and we talked about this on my podcast too. Like I have gone from someone who's very independent and I'll do what I want and all these kind of things. That was my nature. And it still is to a degree. I don't think that totally changes, but just to going back to, like, if I can just truly plan as best that I can, intentionally, just be intentional with my week. And I always say it sounds very simplistic, but if I have to go back and what's most important, and I'll just tell you, like, Travis, for me, like I have kind of my own little 5 F's. So it's faith, family, finances, fitness, and fun. And I believe if you do the first 4 really well, the 5th one becomes much easier, right? That's how my brain works. But if I can start thinking about, okay, in this week, if I'm going to really live up to that, what does that look like? And what does that mean? If I can be as intentional with that up front, I feel, it sounds bad, way less guilty, right? That's where it comes in, is that, hey, I'm spending time with my daughter. And then part of you goes, gosh, but I got to finish up that proposal, and you feel that guilt. If I know I've looked ahead and really been honest, then I'm okay. And that's helped me. I can think about this too. One other example is, I still have a problem with this, but email is this addiction, right? Checking the email. And I'm like, wait a second, like, stop it. But it's really hard to stop. So for me, just to put in, okay, I know I'm going to do it because I know I'm human, but if I could just put in little blocks, like start up with like 3 or 4 a day, get down to 2, I know I'm going to get to it. I don't have to feel guilty about not looking at it now. So I think for me, as long as I'm intentional enough up front, I feel, if you're a video, less guilty of when I'm not doing the things that I used to feel guilty for doing, if that makes any sense at all.
Total sense. Yeah. That's part of the make time method, is actually spend time answering emails, but processing emails. That's all you do in that specific block of time. And all of the other stuff that collects, like social media, text messages, voicemail, whatever. I actually teach, advisors to do that, so that then they can have that peace of mind. What you're talking about of intentionality is what you're calling it, right? It's that peace of mind knowing I did that. I can now spend my time here. But you're right. I think there's a big problem with society right now, because we have these, right? We have these phones. We've got these awesome watches that tell us how many steps we take every day and what, amount of sleep we've had, that sort of thing. Good. But then it also has our text messages and our email and everything else. So we really have to create those boundaries, but knowing, like what you said, that you've been able to take care of those priorities first and you've blocked things out that way, it gives you that freedom to do these other things and be present. That's the word I was looking for.
Yes.
That's the thing I think so many people struggle with, because hold on. Oh yeah, it's good to talk to you, man. Yeah.
Yes.
Great, Brent. I'm looking down on my phone, scrolling through Instagram, whatever that is for you, whatever addiction, if it's social media, if it's email media, we all have it because we have that need to, again, especially if it's for our clients, for financial advisors, insurance agents, we want to help those clients. A lot of us feel like, I've got to help them instantly. I've got to help them all the time, or they're not going to like me, right? They're not going to see me. They're going to go to someone else. And the reality is it's just not true. They're going to like you. You're going to follow your process. As long as you don't, get back to them in 10 days, you can have a decent business turnaround. So I like this. You really are speaking language here that makes a lot of sense. And it is, you talked about being vulnerable. You're being vulnerable right now. Like, it's a struggle. Email is a struggle. Advisors have 3 struggles that I've seen. Email is usually number 1. Social media is usually a close second, but it's almost number 1 in some cases. Like it's a very close second, social media. And with social media, I'm also putting in research. I'm going to plug that in, because what happens, you get on social media and you're following investment research people. And then what happens, you get to what we call advisor porn. And all of a sudden you're looking at research for hours in the name of helping the client. And then the third is administrative tasks. Those are the 3 that I see. So you're right there, man. Like, it's a struggle for probably every person listening to this podcast. And if it's not a struggle, they just don't have it. So that's the thing.
Yeah. Amen. I mean, I tell you, and you're spot on. And you say that, I just, my own life, I'm like, I think one of the challenges, like, when you know better and you learn better, I mean, you're more aware of it. It's also more painful, because I know I shouldn't be doing this, right? But you find yourself, which is good, because then you can kind of snap out of it and learn from it, because some of it's habitual, right? I mean, how many times you pick up your phone, not because you're really looking for something, just because it's what you always do. And it becomes this, like, it's like a drug in your pocket, right? I mean, that's just really what it is. And I will tell you, I guess I share this. I learned the phone thing. I can still struggle with this, but I had a very, being vulnerable, a very big moment that I'll never forget in my life around this. And this was my family at a dinner table. And I'm trying to think how long ago this is, because it's my second daughter, who's now 14. She's almost 15. She would have been maybe 9 or 10. So maybe it's been 5 years ago. At the dinner table. And this was like, I was between as an insurance producer and working with Sitkins, and I was doing my own thing. And I was like, every minute that I wasn't working was a missed opportunity to provide for my family. Like, that was in my mind. Right. And I'm sitting at the dinner table, and, like, too many parents, me included, my phone wasn't right in front of me, but it was close enough to me. Right. And so it buzzes. So what do? Of course, you have to look at it. And it was an email. It wasn't an important email. It wasn't an urgent email, but it was an email. And I thought, I'm going to go ahead and just knock this out, because, they're kind of talking amongst themselves. And so I started replying back. And in fact, I got into where you kind of get in your mode. I'm thinking about this email, not my family, certainly. And my daughter, who was like 9, 10 years old, walks around the table. I didn't even notice it at first, because I was in my email. And all of a sudden you kind of feel someone's presence over your shoulder. And, here I am, this father, and I think we had 4 kids at that time. And she looks at me, she's like, Daddy. And I said, yeah, hon. I'm like, what do you, right next to me. I'm like, what's up? And she goes, do you think for dinner tonight, we could be the most important thing?
Ouch.
Yeah. So, sometimes it takes hard truths from your own kids to wake you up. Yeah.
How old was she?
I think she's about 9 or 10, somewhere in that age. Yeah.
Out of the mouth of babes, right?
Yeah. It's like, there's the truth.
That's the truth. Well, and here's the great thing. The great thing is she knows that they're the most important thing to you. Like, that's a good thing. I'm just going to break this down. This is now group therapy with.
Hey, help me out.
Like, the fact that she knows that she's the most important thing, and you're not being congruent with your intention, says that you've done a good job most of the time, Brent. Does that make sense? Like, yeah. I'm not trying to normalize your behavior. I'm not trying to say that's a bad thing. I mean, raise your hand if you've ever answered an email at the dinner table, right? Yeah. So the fact that you have realized that, and you have a daughter who's raised to know that, no, dad knows I'm the most important thing. He's just not doing it. That's huge. Yeah. But then you're a big enough man to use that as your motivation to be better. Mm-hmm. That's amazing, dude. That's amazing. I know for me, it's like, I don't put the phone, when I come home, I put the phone by the front door.
Yes.
In a little stand.
Yes.
That way my wife knows, like, I've got to go over there, and we've got times where I don't answer the phone and I just have to be present. Yes. But it's gotten to the point where I have to turn the watch off too now, because I'm at the dinner table and I'm getting text message on my phone. I've turned off all notifications so that I am proactive about using it. But even then, we turn into this addictive, it's a dopamine rush. Yeah. We get a hit from a text message, a social media, an email. It's a dopamine rush. This is not something we're making. Like, this is statistical. We've known this for years, but they've actually found that text messages are more addictive than heroin.
Really?
That's text messages, emails, they're worse than text messages, right? They're like your clients. Like, text messages are probably just friends or maybe even close clients. So you think about this, like, that's more addictive than heroin. So this is a definite issue. We're not alone in this. Like, I say I'm the balance guy, but a lot of what I do to help other people become balanced is so that I won't lose my balance. It's self-serving. Yeah, like, I want to be helped. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. Well, it came back to the question you asked me earlier. I mean, one of the things is teaching this stuff and writing a book on it. Like in your case, it's like you're very cognizant, which is good. But it's just, you catch yourself, because it's just, it comes back to like, it is a challenge. Like, social media companies know what they're doing.
100%. And it's super scary once we get deep into it. I'm not saying social media is bad. No. Every tool obviously has a good use, depending on what it's used for. Right. But the reality is that it's the boundaries, right? It's how do we create this? So, what do you do now? So at dinner time, tell us the rest of the story, as of one famous radio host used to say. What's the rest of the story? What do you do now?
Well, the rest of the story, and again, I'm not perfect at this. I've gotten better, but to your point and what you said, here's what I've learned. I have enough distractions and pulls and tugs at not great habits. So what I have learned, kind of what you said, is I don't need to be tempted. So for me, just like you, and again, not always do this, but gotten much better, is my phone goes upstairs in our upstairs bedroom, plugged in. Can't get to it. Or at least and I forget about it, right? Sometimes, but then there's still that, like, ooh, I go up. But if it's within earshot or reach of me, I'll do it. I mean, the same is true. Like, I try to take care of my body, not perfectly, but like, you have kids and they want certain things. Here's what I've learned. I'm not a one bite of ice cream guy. It's not. I want more of it. So it's like, just don't have it next to you. Like, so for me, when I look at it, when it comes to distractions and balance, I just look at it and go, okay, how do I just take some of these temptations and not even make them an option? In fact, that's one of the things you look at. What are some non-optionals? Okay, that can't be there. I can't do that. Right. And the word present is my word for 2022. I have a word every year. It's present. And be present. And actually, I use it in 2 ways. One is, the kind of the cliche way is today's a present. It's a gift. Be grateful. And secondly is be present. So to my mind is if I can be grateful and be present, right? Be intentional, be with someone. If I'm going to do that, that's helped me. So that's kind of my whole focus of how I guess the rest of the story is.
Yeah.
I'm a work in progress. That's making progress. That's all I can say.
I love that. I love that. And it's so real. And this is why I bring this question up, is because I know for a fact that advisors struggle with this. The majority of advisors struggle with this. And, as Paul Harvey used to say, this is the rest of the story. You gave us the rest of the story to know, like, this is what's working for you. Mm-hmm. That's half the reason why I like to do this podcast. Is like, I want to know what's working. Yeah, I have my method. I have, a very specific system, but that I love improving and looking at, what you're doing. And for me, the thing that I hear from you is distance. When my wife and I decided to totally revamp our diet, we took everything out of the cupboard that didn't follow, dumping it out, giving it away, because we need the distance. And my wife knows if she buys something, I'm going to eat it. Like if it's in the cupboard, it's game. Mm-hmm. So just don't have it in the cupboard. Keep the distance. And again, that's one thing that I've done. So maybe you and I have this in common. Like I just keep the phone by the front door so that I'm not walking by it. I'm not picking it up, checking it after hours so that I can keep my balance. I love this. So, we're advisors. I start off as an advisor, an insurance agent. You help a lot of advisors, a lot of insurance agents. And what do you see? I mean, we talked a lot about you, and you've been very vulnerable, and I appreciate this, man. Again, Dr. Perry group therapy with Brent here, but it's been more helpful to me, and hopefully to the audiences they're listening, they can relate to you. Mm-hmm. But as you've worked with, hundreds of advisors, thousands of insurance agents, what do you see as an issue for most that you've worked with in this industry for balance?
Well, I mean, and just a little plug, if the visually, but the book behind me, Best Version Possible. I mean, there's a reason why we titled that, and there actually is a process around it. And I think a couple of things. You already noted this on, there's obviously a lot of crossover specifically in what you do, and you talked about some of the advisor problems. Because whether I'm working with a newer advisor or, $1 million+ producers, which we do, distractions is the number one problem. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, it just is. So then, of course, what are they? Why do you get them? How do you get through them? How do you get focused? So for me, there's a couple of things. If there's one main thing that, specifically with insurance producers, you can take distractions, but what does that mean? What does that impact? Typically, the number one thing that producers struggle with is being in what we call the green zone, which is the area where you actually perform and make money. I'm talking about just in your profession, your occupation, right? And so we actually, we look at things in different ways. And of course, are you building good communication with, we call a high performance team, right? Sales and service. Are we aligned, right? That's really critical, because if you're not, you're always going to feel like you got to do the back end stuff, right? But then from there, I mean, it's very simple sports analogy. If we're playing basketball, if you're on the bench, you can't score points. And too many producers spend way too much time on the bench, and they will give reasons and excuses, and, sometimes compelling, sometimes not, but of reasons why they can't get in the game, but they're not. So the basic things that, we always say this is what we use for producers. And I don't know if you'll find this compelling or not. We say, what's the definition of a producer? One who produces, right? I mean, that's the role, is to build, grow, cultivate relationships and move people through a process where they buy. That's what they're trying to do. And when you're doing the right stuff, you're helping people right in that. But, if you're not in sales, if you're not doing sales appointments, if you're not doing pipeline development, if you're not doing relationship, you said it earlier, you're probably doing emails, admin tasks, stuff that you're not very good at. You screw it up, but you do it because it keeps you busy. That's the biggest thing. And I guess, I've done workshops on this. And I tell producers, and the same thing to advisors, busy is not a badge of honor. So don't claim that it is. So that to me is the number one thing, is they're just not spending time in what they should be doing.
Yeah. So yeah, we definitely have crossover, and that's why we're on each other's podcasts here talking about this. We're speaking same language here. I call it the work sweet spot. You call it the green zone, whatever we call it. I found that on average, advisors, insurance agents are probably in that zone, whatever we call it, only about 20 to 25% of the time.
Agreed.
That's it.
Agreed. Yes.
They are so distracted. And maybe that's the title of this whole podcast episode is distraction, right? We are constantly distracted. And that's a big reason why I write the book about balance, but it's not just productivity. It's getting outside, get rid of that addiction, get outside of the work so that you can break through. I love where you're going though with leadership and sales and growth, because it's absolutely 100% needed. And they can break through it. So what do you find is the 1-2 biggest, tips you can give people who are just not living in that green zone? What do they need to do now? If they were to take anything away from this segment, they say, okay, that was nuggets right there, Brent. Yeah. What should they do today to start getting into that green zone or that work sweet spot?
Well, first, I guess two things come to mind, and one's got a few different layers, but it's pretty simple. We've already addressed it to a degree. At least I did in my own thing. It's the number one thing we talk about is like we teach producers, like, have a Sunday evening review. It could be a Saturday, it could be Friday. I don't care when you do it, but just plan your week in advance. And this goes back to what you said. It's priority power. Like, what's most important? Because here's what we'll find, and I'm sure you see this too. If I've got a hole in my calendar that wasn't intentional, that I wasn't thinking ahead of what I really wanted and what mattered and why it mattered, right? All those things, I will not fill it with the most important stuff. Like, I just won't. It'll be wasted time. So the biggest thing I would say is just be so intentional with what, your ideal week looks like, but think about what that really means too. We're going back to like family and having some freedom in your personal time. What does that mean? If it's like, if I'm going to have a date night, it better be in the calendar. I'm not going to magically make it appear on a Friday at 4 p.m. So that to me is like number one within that. And then I guess this goes in with that. But for me, and I don't know if you talk about this a whole lot on your podcast or not, but just how are you starting your day? Everybody talks about morning routines. The millionth person that's probably mentioned it, but it is such a game changer in the fact that, going back to this little device here, like if that's how your day starts, I just believe how you start your day is in many cases how you live your day. So how do you want to start? Because not only is it going to be productive for you, but to me, it gives you a sense of control. And once you lose that control, it becomes really hard to get it back. So how do you want to start your day? Because I just think it's so important. And it's taken me a long time. And now it's just become a habit to me that I start my day with reflection and prayer because it's important to me. Right? I need that time because once I get going, I start my day with moving my body because, hey, it's the only thing I have to live in, take care of it. Right. I start my day with some learning and reading. And sometimes what's the number one thing that I want to accomplish today and go through that in my mind. And like, just to have that clarity makes a huge difference. So again, those are some things that jump to my mind.
Wonderful. I absolutely love it. Yeah. Amen. Amen. To all what was said. I do the exact same things in different ways, but the principles are the same. Have that review. What are you doing with your week? Make sure that you're taking care of your priorities first. It comes back to the whole Stephen Covey, first things first principle of the big rocks, and do those things first. I'm more of the opinion of put the first things on your calendar. And don't shame yourself if you get up in the morning and you had to rush out the door and get to some place you slept in and the baby kept you up at night, right? Like that's never happened to you, right, Brent? Or you found out that the teenager drained your battery the night before. And so you have to jump it with the other car and the power went out all in the same night. I'm not speaking from experience. No, but things obviously can go wrong. Yeah. But what's great is that if you have it in the calendar most of the time, you're going to do it most of the time. The Pareto principle, 80-20. Like if you're doing it 80% of the time, you're doing pretty good. So I love that you start your day with prayer. I love you start the day out working out and exercising and moving and reviewing weekly. What perfect nuggets, man, right there. So real quick before we end the show, I know this has gone this has been such a great interview. I've just loved this. Like we could eat this up for a long time. But this is a short, format podcast. But how do you help advisors with their balance, and how can they, really benefit from working with you?
Yeah, and we're very niche focused. We're independent insurance agencies. I know that's not all of your audience, but it's the principle of working with us. To me, there's a few things that we look at, right? And if I look at like the big 3 C's, right? We want to help agencies, and within those, insurance agency professionals within teams, to get greater clarity. I think it starts with that. What do you really want? Why do you want it? How are you going to get there? I know those sound like basic questions, but if you ask most people, they really aren't going to give you a very good answer. They don't know. So help them with that. Understanding consistency and kind of what you talked about. What are the very few disciplines that if you do well are going to win, right? And we always talk about how do you make results predictable and guaranteed? And the last part is commitment. Who and how are you going to be accountable, right? Like the best coaches I've ever had, like they wanted the best for me, that they also hold me accountable. Brent, you said you wanted to achieve that. Why aren't you doing it? So in a big perspective, that's what we do with independent insurance agencies. We help with clarity, consistency, and commitment. And we work with agency teams holistically. That's our process. So again, our company is Sitkins Group. You go to sitkins.com. You can learn all about us and what we do. If it's something that you're interested in and learning what we do, we have the book. I'm trying to catch you, with all your success in your book, but our book, Best Version Possible, is out there that you can take a look at. So a lot of ways we help agencies, but at the end of the day, I say our mission is to be a catalyst. And, it's just that term is used a lot, just to be a catalyst. Like you already kind of know what to do. Let's help you do it at the highest level, so you live a life not with regrets, right? And none of us want that. So
100%. My tagline is live life on purpose. Yep. We're so in sync on this. And you're helping a very niche segment here. Again, some of you might be an independent insurance agent, or you might know one. That's the beauty of this industry. You might know one who needs this book. Brent, where can they get the book? Is it on Amazon? Is it on your website?
It will become an Amazon eventually. Right now, it's just on our site, sitkins.com.
Okay.
Sitkins, sitkins.com, and then /BVP for best version.
BV as in best version possible.
Best version possible. BVP. Yeah. Sitkins.com /BVP, and you can get it there.
Awesome. So everybody, if you want to get more of what Brent's offering here in his book, go to sitkins.com /BV as in Victor, P as in possible. So best version possible. Thanks for being on the show, Brent. It's so fun. Like this is just, I love this interaction. Getting to hear what you've gone through, your wisdom has been very beneficial to me, and hopefully the rest of your audience. If you love this, subscribe, click the like button, and wherever this has been shown you, share it with someone else who needs it. Share with an independent insurance agent who needs to connect with Brent today on this. Thanks again, Brent, for being part of the show.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Dr. Perry. And like I said, I love what you do, and what you do matters. So listen to him. He's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. Thanks.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And thanks everybody for listening. That's a wrap of this next episode of the Balanced Advisor Podcast.